So I want to do a video now about the ExactCAD Snap Vias tool. So currently in the ExactCAD software, there's this Snap Vias tool, and this is what it looks like. Um, so this is the first version of it. Basically, the idea of this tool is that it will draw vias. I mean, it'll place vias at the location of circles that are on a user layer. So the way that it would normally work is like here are some parts, and built into the part, into the cell, are some via locations. So whoever made this part in the library looked at the data sheet for the part, and the data sheet called for having some vias placed around it. Um, like in this case, this is an RF part. I'm not sure what it is, but um, it's got these places where vias are supposed to go around it. So the way you would do it is you would just select a via here, and you would select the circles in draw mode. So we'll just grab all this stuff right here. Um, we select a net, which in this case would be ground, and then we would just hit that button and those vias would get popped in there. Okay, so that was the original intent of this tool. And it was really just for this kind of purpose. Well, I got a request for a software tool that would do the same thing, except that it would be used to place the vias according to circles that run user layers, but the person who was asking for it said, hey, I want to have user layers that are named with the same name as the vias, and I want to use the user layer name to determine what vias to place there on those on the location of the circles. So I later found out that the reason they wanted to do this is because they're doing some boards that have a lot of vias, like hundreds of thousands of vias, in some cases more than 1 million vias. If you can imagine a board that has more than 1 million vias, yeah, that's pretty crazy. Um, but that's what they wanted, because what they were doing is that they had somebody give them a DXF file with all of these via locations. So the person had kind of designed the board and put the via locations where they wanted them with a DXF file, and then the PCB designers had to import that and put all the vias on those locations. So what they were doing is, something kind of like this. They were just copying, and then they had the snap function, the snap thing turned on, and of course there was some problem because of checking and all this. And so they're actually placing hundreds of thousands of vias like this by hand. So you can see that that would take like a super long time, and it might not be easy to get them right on the right locations and all that. So the need for the request that was made was a pretty big need. So I got to work on this, and I made an upgrade to the tool. So this is the new one. It's got the same functionality that it used to have here. There is one kind of major difference in it, which is that, if you look at the first one, it only had vias that were already placed on the board. And I thought, well, probably, we're not going to want to have to make people go through the process of placing one of the vias that they want to use for, all these different vias on the board. So we're going to include every via that's in the local padstack database in the list here. So instead of interrogating the board, now I interrogate the PC, or I'm sorry, the padstack database, and I get all the vias that are in it. Okay, so the general idea here is that there's a lot of different ways you can place vias, right? You can have a via padstack, you can have different nets, You could have the vias, the circles that are involved in, the placement locations on different user layers, and you might also have a different via span. So I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? Well, what you can do here, what I came up with, is to select from all of these drop downs and make a set, and then use this button to like establish those parameters as a set. So let's just do an example here. I'll just select the top via, whatever that is. I'll select the ground net, and oh, I need a user layer, and I don't really have a user layer that I need with the same name as that via. Okay, well, maybe we should have a function that creates user layers for all the vias that are in the database. So I made that function right here. Create user layers for each via. So if we look over here on the user layers, this is what we have right now. And I'm just going to hit that button, create user layers for each via. And the display control is going to go into some gyrations over there. So I'm just going to pause here for a minute while that happens and does its thing. Okay, so here we are back again, and now there's a whole bunch more user layers over here, and they all have the same name as the vias, padstack. Okay, so now we can go back to creating these sets. So again, I have the first via selected there from the drop-down list, and now, oh look, it didn't read those because they're brand new and it doesn't reread them when they're created. So I'm going to have to exit out here and then restart the tool. And we'll see if it reads them now. Okay, so let's try this again. We got the first via, the net, and now we go to the user layer and boom, there it is. And so in this board, I don't have any blind vias or buried vias set up in here. But if I did, they would appear in this list. Whatever via spans were defined in the board would show up there. So I'm just going to do that. So to give it a name, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the padstack name. And then I'm going to do underscore GND underscore 1 through 8. That's going to be the name. Okay, so I have a name, I got a via, I got a net, user layer, and a via span. That's a set that I can use to place vias. So I'm going to click this button, create via net user layer span set. Okay, so I got that one. I'm going to create another one here with the next via, same net, and next user layer, same span. Going to copy the padstack name, and I'm just going to paste it in right there, and then hit that button again. Okay, so now in this drop-down list, there are 2 items. And if I switch back and forth between them, the data that's in here changes, it updates. So what's happening in the background is that this information is being saved in a file in the design. And I save it in a format so that, when it gets read back in, um, it can populate all this stuff and keep track of this information. So I'm just going to exit right now and restart. And you'll see that those sets are stored in there. So all the information we put in there already is in there now. Okay, so the idea is that you would pick out, these different sets of VIA setups that you wanted to use according to the VIA pad stack, the net, and the user layer, and whatever VIA span you wanted to use. And you would make that as a set. So you could make as many of those as you wanted to. So then you'd have them all ready to go. And how would you use it? Okay, so we're going to say keep on top. That just keeps this window on top of the Expedition window. So I built in some functions just to make it easy to kind of test this out. So let's see here. Create user layers for each via. We already did that. Add circles to via user layers for testing. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're just going to have the tool create some circles for us to make sure that everything works okay. So I'm going to set this on here, and it pops up a little dialog box that says, how many vias do you want on each layer? So I'm going to say, let's see, how about 100? Okay, so now it's going to start drawing circles over here. So there's a whole bunch of these, and it's going to draw 100 circles for each one of them. So I'm going to pause the recording right here and then start over when it's done. Okay, so all the circles are now over here, and so there's 100 circles for each different via pad stack. And if we zoom in on these, you can see that they're just circles that are drawn on these different user layers. Okay, and so I have two of these sets defined, and I could select one and say process current set, or I could say process all sets. So I'm just going to hit the process all sets button right now, and it's going to say here that it's adding vias. So if we zoom in, see it just added vias to all of these things, and you can see it adding them to these over here. And since we just had those two sets, it's now done adding the vias there. And there they are. So let's see if the pad stack name matches the user layer name. So I'll go to route mode here, and the via pad stack, let's see, properties, pad stack properties, and it says blah, 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 7Y7D6B. Okay, well, that's the same one as the first one. Okay, and user layer object on, yeah, there it is. It's the same thing. Okay, so that one looks good. And here's another one right over here. Pad stack name is 8Y8D6B. So in draw mode, 8Y8D6B. Yeah, so that's it. That's pretty much how it works. So you can draw a lot of circles on a user layer to define via locations, and this tool will put the vias on them a lot faster than you could if you were doing it by hand. So that's about it. So I just want to go over one more thing here about this, which is that the tool has this Drc mode you can turn on and off here. So I'm going to show you how that works. We've already got these drawn in here, so I'm just going to select them and delete them. Just going to do it again. And I'm going to grab this part and just stick it over here somewhere. Maybe another like slightly bigger part. Just stick those parts in there. Okay, so these nets are going to be different than the ground net, except for that one right there, which is the ground net. But placing a via in one of these locations where these other pads are would cause a DRC error. So we're going to try this again with DRC turned on and then off, and we'll see what happens as a difference. So we already have the sets defined, the two that we had earlier. So I'm just going to hit process all sets here with DRC turned on. And it's done with the first one. It's going to go through and do the second one. And there it is, all done. So you can see that the places where it would have caused an error, there are no vias there. All the other places have a via. So the DRC function worked as intended. In this case, it skipped the ones that are on this pad, but in this one, This is the same net, so that was okay. And there we go. So delete those again and turn DRC off, and then do the same function again, process all sets. So this time it's going to put the vias in there regardless of whether there's a DRC error or not. And so here we are, here's the first one. And you can see that the vias are popped in there right in those pads, which would clearly cause a DRC violation. But the idea here is to give the user the option to do it, whichever way they want. Sometimes you want to turn checking off and just blast the stuff in there. Sometimes you want it to follow the rules. So the point is that you can do it either way you want. Alrighty, that's it.